Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining Defeat Duchenne Canada for another in our 2022 webinar series. And today's session, we'll be introducing you to our clinical trial finder tool. My name is Rick Moss, and I'm the National Director for Strategic Partnerships. But before we get started, a few housekeeping points to note. We want to ensure that you can clearly hear today's session. So if you'd like to test your audio, please click on the up arrow next to the audio button on the bottom left-hand side of your screen, and this will allow you to adjust your volume level. You are currently muted and your video is off, so please do not turn on your video or your mic during the webinar. The Q&A feature, all you have to do there is type in your question and submit in the Q&A. Questions will be addressed after the presentation. And also feel free to use the chat feature to post comments and questions. Our speakers will aim to answer them live at the end of this session. Then speaking of the end of the session, we will have plenty of time for discussion where you can raise your hand to unmute and turn on your camera for in-person conversations with today's speakers, or post questions into the chat to be read aloud by our monitor. Today's webinar is being recorded, as was mentioned earlier, and therefore please be mindful of that and about sharing personal information during the discussion. You will receive a link to the recording in the next week or so, and please feel free to share that with family and friends who were unable to be with us tonight. It will also be found on our website at defeatduchenne.ca and on our YouTube channel, which is at Defeat Duchenne. And now let's find out a little bit more about who's out there tonight. We have a few polling questions for you, 3 to be precise, and we'd like to take a moment to get to know just who is on the call. So if we could do the first poll, where are you calling from? Just to indicate province-wise, where you are calling from this evening. Okay, we've got Quebec representation, Newfoundland and Labrador, and also the majority of the folks are from Ontario. So welcome to everyone, that's great. Our second question is, what is your connection to Defeat Duchenne Canada? And we'll give you a minute to respond. And we'll see what the results tell us. Okay, thank you for completing that. We have parents and relatives to Duchenne, healthcare practitioners and industry partners on this evening. So welcome again. And last question in the poll, have you attended one of our events before? Okay. We have a mix of people who have and haven't, and first event is the largest there. So welcome to the new folks. People have been on the forum and on some other webinars and at the conference too. So that's great. Thank you very much for participating in those polls. That helps us a lot. Now, for those of you who are perhaps new to the organization, I want to tell you, John and Jesse Davidson founded Jesse's Journey back in 1995 to lead research, advocacy, and support in the fight to defeat Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Since then, we've united families, raised awareness, and funded almost $15 million in research projects around the world. After much deliberation and consultation with our Duchenne community, we changed our name earlier this year to Defeat Duchenne Canada, a new name with the same vision, a future without Duchenne. I encourage you to get to know Defeat Duchenne Canada by checking out our new website, defeatduchenne.ca, and sign up for our e-newsletter, which is loaded with information and is sent out regularly. And now I'd like to introduce you to Nicola Worsfold, our National Vice President of Research, Education, and Advocacy, who's going to provide an introduction to today's webinar and to the speakers. Nicola, over to you.
Thank you so much, Rick, and welcome everyone. Thank you for sacrificing the first period of the playoff game to join us this evening. Next time we will certainly check the playoff schedule before we plan these events. But I know I am representing, so I hope some of you are wearing your jerseys tonight and getting ready for the big game. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Nicola. I'm a mother of a 15-year-old with Duchenne. I've been working with Defeat Duchenne Canada now for almost 3 years in the areas of research, advocacy, and education. The agenda today is we're going to talk briefly about the importance of clinical trials and how our organization is supporting families across Canada. And then we have Rebecca Lee, who's going to walk us through the tool. And we've left a lot of time at the end for any questions that you may have, as well as share some additional resources to help support you. So I want to first of all say that I'm absolutely thrilled that we are finally able to launch our clinical trial tool. This has been a 2-year project, and I owe the success of this launch to all the individuals that are shown here. Rebecca Lee and her family have been a longtime friend of Jesse's journey, now Defeat Duchenne Canada. She is a Duchenne sister and has studied molecular biology and genetics with some brilliant researchers, such as Dr. Ronnie Cohen at Sick Kids and Dr. Kevin Flanagan at Nationwide Children's in the US, just to name a few of those. Rebecca is also a member of our Duchenne Family Advisory Committee and has been working very closely with me over the last 2 years on this tool as our research intern. Rochelle Tenhoff, which I'm sure a lot of you know, is our Defeat Duchenne Canada's National Director of Marketing and Stakeholder Engagement, and she's helped us design the look of the tool and get the message out there to our community. And last and certainly not least is the Limio team. This group of developers that specialize in global digital health under the coordination of Sarah Ackerman have programmed and created this tool for us. So it's been an absolute pleasure to work with this group, and they have really listened to us, helped us find the right solutions to ensure our tool meets the needs of Canadians living with Duchenne. So thank you to Sarah and the Limio team. I have a couple of polling questions here. Let me see, hold on, just bear with me here. Let me just bring it up. So the first question is, are you currently or have you previously participated in a clinical trial? So I'll give everyone a couple seconds here to answer. Just a few more seconds. So no surprise at all is everyone here 100% have answered no, and that's not surprising at all. Clinical trials, number one, it's not for everyone. Number two is, it's often hard to find one that's suited for you, and getting access to trials can sometimes be a challenge, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a bit. The next question is, if you haven't, I'm curious to understand a little bit more about the reason why. Some of the reasons I had mentioned, but please go ahead and put in your response. And just as I suspected, a lot of people are answering it's because their child does not qualify for trials, which is not surprising at all. And there you go. There you have it, 100% that answered that question. The next question I have for you is, what is the primary source of information on clinical trials? So is it clinicaltrials.gov? So where do you source your information for clinical trials? Clinicaltrials.gov, patient organization websites, your doctor, Google, from other Duchenne families, or other? And so we see answers are clinicaltrial.gov and patient organization websites, which is great, and their doctor, which are all wonderful places to get that type of information. Perfect. Okay. So I just want to talk a little bit about, the importance of clinical trials, and it is a bit of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it offers a lot of hope for families. It gives us that feeling that we're doing something to help. There's some, altruistic, part to that where we feel that we're contributing to science. And we hope that, by participating in a clinical trial, it's going to lead to a potential therapy that could also help other Duchenne families. And the third is around access to medication. And often clinical trials serves as that early access to medications. But on the other hand, it also brings a lot of disappointment to families. A lot of families in Canada, and I think we heard that on our individuals who answered the poll today, is that they failed to meet the inclusion criteria. And some people just don't have the ability to accommodate a clinical trial because their work-life balance they're not able to accommodate that. And I mean, we have enough going on in our lives as it is. To add the burden and the time commitment of a clinical trial is very difficult. Some families may have the fear of doing more harm than good in a clinical trial. And then in some cases, there is an expectation of a cure. And if you're enrolled in a trial, which many families in Canada have participated in trials that have either had to discontinue early because of safety reasons, or simply the drug didn't work. And that's a huge disappointment to families. And so I just wanted to take this moment to remind families that, clinical trials are experimental. And the whole reason why they're conducting the trial is they're trying to understand whether or not the drug works and whether it's safe. And so we really don't know if the drug's going to work. And you are taking on unknown risks as the safety profile is being established. And so this is why it's so important that if you do have the opportunity to participate in a clinical trial, to really sit down with the clinical trial team and make sure you get all of your questions answered. You understand the benefits and risks of participating in the clinical trial before you consent to participate. And I just wanted to mention some of the ways that Defeat Duchenne Canada are supporting families. And obviously the reason why we're here today is that we're launching our clinical trial finder tool, which we have developed. And what we hope that this tool will provide to families is a source to access information, that it doesn't matter where you live in this country, that you have access, everybody here has access to the same information in real time. And that's what this clinical trial tool is doing. And it's updated on a regular basis. And so I encourage folks to go in and continue to check to see what's changed or if new trials are coming up. We've also tailored the tool specifically to you. So there is an intake form that you have to fill out before you go into looking at what trials are available. And that is tailored to the individual. So your age, your stage, and your mutation. And I don't want to get into too much details because Rebecca's going to take us through this, but the mutation is actually something that is quite unique to our tool. And I don't know of any other clinical trial tools that are providing that specificity to their search engines. And so it's really important that you do understand what your mutation is. If you don't know your mutation, that's okay as well. You can still continue to do your search. It's just that the tool won't be as specific to your particular mutation. And then finally, it's around the knowledge that you're gaining from this. So knowledge is so important. Information, we can't get it as families, we can't get enough information. And information gives us the ability to advocate for the best care. It helps us make informed choices, and it enables us to have meaningful discussions with our doctors. And that's what we hope this tool will provide for you. On the other side, there are activities that our organization are working on more behind the scenes, and that's advocating on your behalf to the industry and to the government around broader inclusion criteria. So we're trying to advocate so that more individuals have more opportunities if they want to participate in clinical trials. We advocating for more trial opportunities in Canada, but also more sites across the country. I mean, we have a very large country. And so, if we only have one trial site, then it makes it very difficult for everyone to be able to, travel and access that trial. It becomes a barrier. And also too, I mean, I remember, when my son was diagnosed 8 years ago, there weren't any trials available in Canada. There were only trials available in the US, and that was our only option at that time. But if you actually look online now, there's so many more opportunities in Canada, which is really, really great to see. And then finally, we're advocating for timely access to medications. And we're doing this on a broader sense in that we're advocating for a rare disease strategy. But medications that complete the clinical trials and have data to support both their safety as well as their efficacy, or that they can benefit patients, we are going to certainly advocate to ensure that our families across Canada can access these medications as soon as possible. And then finally, a lot of you are aware of our research granting competition. So every year, Defeat Duchenne Canada supports research, and we usually support over $1 million a year that goes towards research. And this is really, really important in building that pipeline of new innovative medicines, because if it isn't for that research, then we would never get to that clinical trial phase and have these opportunities to even get to a drug. So, one of the ways that our organization is doing is we're supporting this by granting the best projects that have the best clinical able to translate to the clinic. So with that, I'm going to stop talking because I'm going to pass it over to Rebecca Lee. I know Rebecca is super excited to finally be able to walk you through this tool and share it. And I'm really excited for her to be doing this for you guys today. So with that, Rebecca, I'm going to pass it over to you. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. We're really excited to share this tool with you. So I thought that I'd get started by showing you how to access our tool from our new website. So if you're looking to find the tool, you're going to want to go to the Living with Duchenne tab. And from there, we're going to look under Research and Clinical Trials. Next, we'll look under About Clinical Trials. And finally, we'll click on the Clinical Trial Finder tool. So this will redirect you to a page on our website where you can launch the Clinical Trial Finder tool, and it directs you to the homepage of the tool. And so in order to use our tool, you have to agree to our privacy policy and terms of use. And this is a good point in time to mention that any information that you enter into our tool is completely anonymous. It's not going to be tracked. And so you can be sure that your privacy will be protected and that your data will not be shared with anyone, not even our own organization. To start the tool, then we press Get Started. So we're going to show you an example tonight, just as proof of concept for the tool. And so the first piece of information that we need when determining which clinical trials will be right for you is whether or not you or your child has Duchenne or Becker muscular dystrophy. So in this case, we're going to select Duchenne. Next, we have to enter the sex of the person. And so in this case, we're going to enter male. We also have to enter the date of birth. So we're going to assume that this is for a person who was born in January of 2014, that they are able to walk, and that they are on a stable dose of corticosteroids. Next, we have the page where you can insert your mutation information. And so for those of you who know your mutation, this will probably be easy. For those of you who are unsure about your mutation, you are able to select do not know or prefer not to say. However, as Nicola mentioned previously, you will not get results that are as specific for you or your child. So that means that some of the trials that show up will likely not be trials that you are eligible for based on your mutation. And so if you want to figure out your mutation and you don't know, you could always ask your doctor, or you could try to look at your genetic report that you would have gotten during diagnosis. And so I'm just going to pass it back to Nicola for a minute, who's going to talk quickly about interpreting your genetic report.
Thanks, Rebecca. Sorry, I'm having some challenges here unmuting myself. So I just, can everyone see my screen? Can you see my screen, Rebecca?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So a genetic report is something that you should have received on diagnosis. And hopefully you had a chance to also meet with a genetic counselor who would have, walked you through this. Now, depending on where you live in the country, this report might look different. So I've just essentially provided an example of a report that so happens to come from Sick Kids here in Toronto, Ontario. But on your genetic report at some on some area of it, it'll have a diagnosis. And it'll have some specifics about what your mutation is. So in this example here, we have two examples, one of a deletion and one of a duplication. And so the information that you want to be sure that you focus on is, if you look on the deletion at the top here, you'll see at the very top, it says what the diagnosis is, and it's a deletion of exons 48 to 50 in the dystrophin gene. It also says it a little further down on that chart. Same with the duplication. So in this particular case, this is a duplication of exons 8 to 32. So that's the information that you want to take from this report that you can put into the clinical trial. And, at any point, if you have any questions, feel free to ask your doctor. If you don't have a genetic report, you can't find your genetic report, again, make sure you ask your doctor. And I encourage all families to know your to know your mutation, pardon me. It's really important that you do know your mutation, because at some point it might become important. And whether that's for clinical trials or for other reasons, it's always good to know what your mutation is. And then I just wanted to point out that we did have, so Dr. Amberger is a genetic counselor in Toronto at Sick Kids, and she gave a really, really great presentation on understanding the genetics of Duchenne. So if you want to learn more about that, it is on our website under About Duchenne, Diagnosis, and Genetic and Diagnostic Testing. There is a link to this YouTube, and I think Kate hopefully will throw into the chat as well the YouTube link, so you can easily access that if you need to. Back to you, Rebecca.
Okay. So I'll just run through a couple of quick examples. So the way that this works is, if you select deletion or duplication, there'll be an additional question that will come up. And so if only one exon is affected, for example, if you had a mutation that was a deletion of exon 8, you could enter it as one exon. Or like the example that Nicola showed, you could put in 48 to 50 if there are multiple exons affected. And so the same thing applies for duplication patients. For point mutations and nonsense mutations, you would just select the type of mutation that you have. And again, if you don't know, you can always select the don't know or prefer not to say. So this is the result page that you will see after you've entered your information. And I'm just going to highlight a few of the key features of this page. So here we have a list of the clinical trials that the tool has determined to be the most appropriate fit for you. And the first thing that we have is the title of the actual study. Then we also have a bar here that highlights the most important features. And so depending on the trial, you may see different icons. So for example, the magnifying glass is an icon that indicates the status of the trial. So this particular trial is recruiting patients to be involved. This little globe icon will indicate which country the trial takes place in. So whether it's in the United States, Canada, or else global. The calendar icon indicates the age range. So this would be 2 years old and up. The corticosteroid requirements are indicated by this little pill icon. And so in this particular trial, it is not specified whether or not you have to be on corticosteroids. There are other icons that I will show you further down. So this particular trial requires a muscle biopsy. And so some families choose not to participate in clinical trials that require biopsies. There also is another icon that will show you the phase for particular trials. If it is a trial that involves a medication, it will tell you how the medication is administered, whether or not it's taken as a pill, as an injection, or as an IV infusion. There is also an MRI icon for trials that require MRI. And if there is a drug in the study, the name of the drug will be highlighted as well. Next on each listing, we have a summary of the overall trial, just so that you can get an idea of what is going on. There also is an icon at the bottom that will indicate the location, the nearest location. And there also is a link to the original clinicaltrials.gov listing if you want to have more information. There also is the option to press the Learn More button if there's a trial that you are interested in. And so the Learn More button typically will show you the inclusion and exclusion criteria if you want to learn a little bit more about what is required to be part of the clinical trial. Now, we have also included a very granular filter system so that you are able to go through and select what is important to you in a clinical trial. And you're able to see how many clinical trials will show up depending on the different selections that you make. So to get started, I will start with trial location. I'll come back to treatment approach in a little bit. So some of you may be looking for clinical trials that are only in Canada. You may even be looking for clinical trials that are only in your province, in which case you can enter your province here. There's also the option to look at Canada and the US, or if you live in a province that borders a US state that's not too far from you, and you'd like to look specifically in a certain state, you're also able to enter state. And so just as an example, in order for these filters to work, you do have to go up to the top and press apply filter. So this lists all of the trials that you are likely to be eligible for or may be eligible for that are in Canada. Sorry, I just have to zoom out there. And so to go back to the full list, you have to unselect and apply filter. We also have the ability to sort based on phase. And so there are many different reasons why you might be interested in one phase over the other. So phase one is the part of a study where really the only thing that is being looked at is whether or not the patients are tolerating the medication or the intervention. And so this carries more risk to it. And so some families want to avoid phase one trials. Phase two is also very similar in that safety is being tested. And in this case, different dosages are going to be tested. So the study is not yet at the point where they are testing to see whether or not it is effective for the patients. And so phase three would be the studies where safety is still being monitored, but it has had a baseline from phase one and phase two. And they're also looking to see how effective it is for the patients. If you want to learn more about these phases, we do have a button here that will redirect you to our About Clinical Trials page. It tells you a little bit more about discovery to approval. So this would be the process of developing a therapeutic, and also more information on all the different phases. We also have the ability to filter based on the status of the trial. So by default, it will show you all of the trials that are recruiting, not yet recruiting, and enrolling by invitation. So an important point to point out about enrolling by invitation, this is typically a lot of the clinical trials in this category are going to be studies that are continuations of previous studies. So if you were in the initial study, they may be doing a secondary study to monitor a longer term effect on patients. And so if you were not a part of the first study, you may not be eligible for the second. Or there may be other reasons why a trial is enrolling by invitation only. It may be that it is only taking place at one particular center, and so patients who are regularly seen at that center are the main target for the study. But in this case, if you see a trial that is enrolling by invitation only, it never hurts to reach out to the researchers who may be able to talk to you about your case and may be able to involve you in the study. If you want to look at some of the other categories, you're able to do so. So perhaps you were in a clinical trial previously, you could select active, not recruiting. That would be if you were in a clinical trial currently and you wanted to go back and look at the information on clinicaltrials.gov, you could find your study by selecting active, not yet recruiting. If it was a study you completed in the past, you could go under completed. We also have the other section, which includes withdrawn trials, suspended trials, and unknown trials. There also is the option to look into the study type. And so if you wanted an interventional study, which is technically a clinical trial, that would be something in which a device or a therapy or a treatment of some sort is being tested to see how effective it is. There also would be observational studies, and these are more what you might call natural history studies, in which patients are observed over the long term, but are not given a specific treatment that is being tested. There also are patient registries, which are really great to be involved in through different organizations that are advocating for patients and families. And so if that's something you're looking for, you can filter by that as well. And again, there's the expanded access, which is sort of similar to what I mentioned before about enrolling by invitation. If you were previously in a study, there may be expanded access after the initial study was completed. And so that's what that filter tool is for. There also is the option to filter based on whether or not a placebo control is being used in the study. And so if you want to learn a little bit more about clinicaltrials.gov, again, there's a link here that you can click that will redirect you to our page, and you can read more about placebo controls. We also have the ability to change your initial answer on whether or not the individual is able to walk or is on corticosteroids. So for example, maybe you or your child is not currently on a dose of stable corticosteroids, but you may be interested in going on corticosteroids if it meant you could be eligible for a particular clinical trial. You're able to see what changes that would make to the study results, the number of studies that you may be eligible for. And so just back to treatment approach, I just want to redirect you to a resource here. So this is a set of categorization that our organization has used to help patients and families understand the different categories of treatment approaches that are being used by researchers and doctors who are trying to find ways to help treat muscular dystrophy. And so we do have a Learn More button that will redirect you to our page about the areas of Duchenne research, and you can read more about these different categories. And so finally, just a few more things to point out. If at any point you have feedback for us, you're more than welcome to press our Contact Us button and to send us some information, feedback, questions, whatever it may be. We also do have a search bar If you are looking for a particular trial, you can search for it. We also have the option to print, and so I'll just show you a quick example of how that works. So if you were to press print now, you would be able to see all 51 trials. If you wanted to do a filter, let's say you were interested in gene therapies, you may select that you want to look under the replacing dystrophin treatment approach and apply your filter. And then you could print out this one clinical trial. And so really the reason why we have included the option to print is if you wanted to take the subset of trials that you found unfiltered, you could take those to your doctor to facilitate more discussions about which clinical trial would be best for you. So I hope that this was a helpful run through, and I'm going to turn things back over to Rick. And thank you all for listening. And if you have any questions, we've got a Q&A session coming up.
We do, and thank you very much, Rebecca. That was great. I am going to ask Nicola as well to jump in here, and she has a couple of other things to cover before we move on.
Thank you, Rick. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in either the Q&A option, or you can put them in the chat. Also, feel free to raise your hand. We'll be happy to answer any questions. I know Rebecca did a fantastic job of walking us through the tool. It's certainly something that we encourage you all to try it out. And if at any point in time you have any questions, comments, feedbacks, we're very much would love to hear from you. What I'd like to do now is just go over some additional resources and supports that are available to you. First of all, where to access the tool is probably an important one to cover first. The tool is on our website, and Rebecca had taken us through the website on where you might find it. There's also a direct link, which I think Kate's going to throw into the chat, so you can just access that quite quickly if you need to. I recommend that once you've accessed the site is to save it to your favorites, and that way you can just go to it whenever you need. I also wanted to direct you to some additional resources, which Rebecca had already mentioned as well in her walkthrough on our website under Living with Duchenne, Research and Clinical Trials. We have a page about clinical trials. There's lots of really great information on that. We continue to expand on these resources as well. But again, feedback is very welcome. If there's something there that you would like more of, we can certainly work on that. And hopefully we'll throw that link in the chat as well. I also wanted to direct you to our family forum last fall. Dr. Laura McAdam did an excellent presentation on clinical trials. And if you want to learn more, or if you weren't able to attend that, you want to hear the presentation, she did a really good job. And you can find that also on our website under Living with Duchenne, Education and Support. We have a link there for family forums. And if you click on the Toronto, Ontario forum, you'll see a list of recordings, and this one is called Participating in Clinical Trials, and I think we'll also throw that link up in the chat too, so it's easy for you to access. And finally, I also wanted to bring your attention to a program that the London Health Sciences Centre at Children's Hospital is running. They have an interactive educational session on shared decision making. This is an excellent program. It's run by the team at London Health Sciences, and it's open to all families across the country. The next session is going to be on Monday, June 27th from 4 to 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll throw the link as well in the chat box to register, where you can get a little bit more information about that program. And then we've mentioned this before in other webinars, as well as our forum, is our clinical trial concierge. This is a service that's being provided through the Neuromuscular Disease Network for Canada. And I highly encourage families to contact the clinical trials concierge. If you find trials in our tool that are in Canada and you want to get more specific information about that particular trial, that would be a good time to reach out to the concierge, who can provide you with more details. And we'll throw that information also in the chat box. So as we mentioned, questions, feedback, please reach out. You can send a message to our research inbox that is monitored on a regular basis. You're also welcome to reach out to me personally. I know a lot of families do that, and I'm very happy to chat one-on-one. So you can get access to a live person if you need to. Just send us a note on email, and someone will get back to you very soon. And I think that brings us to the end. I'm going to pass it off to Rick, and I just want to say thank you, everybody, for attending. And I know there's an important game happening right now, which I intend to go and watch also. But Rick, I'll pass it back over to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thanks, Nicola, and thanks, Rebecca. That was a great presentation for sure. And now we've got the open part of the evening for discussion, questions, and so on and so forth. So we encourage you to do just that. We have a number of ways for you to reach out and ask those questions. I just want to remind you too, before we get to that you'll see all of the links that Nicola and Rebecca had referenced in the chat as well. So please go back there for all the links if you didn't have a chance to catch them. And as we said, this is also being recorded. We wanted to remind you of that and regarding the information provided tonight. So the ways to join us in discussion now is through our Q&A feature. You just simply type in your question and submit it in the Q&A. That's one option. You can also use the chat feature to post comments and questions right now, or you can raise your hand. That feature will allow us to unmute you and turn on your camera for in-person conversations with our speakers. So anyone interested in participating in any of those ways, please step forward and we will get you connected.
I think we did a really good job.
Yeah. Q&A, no questions.
Yeah. I think everybody wants to go watch the game.
We have let me just check the chat to be sure. No, those are our tools that are there and the links that are there. So nothing in the chat, but I will just maybe give it another minute or so. If you are formulating any questions at all, join us through the Q&A, the chat, or the raise your hand feature, and we'll be happy to try to answer the questions as best we can. Going once, going twice. Okay. Anyway, good. If there is anything, obviously after this webinar is over, you can always reach out to us for sure. Now we want you to please take a look at the link in our chat or on screen to complete a short evaluation. These are so helpful to us in giving us direction as to the kinds of programs you want to hear in the webinars, the topics you want discussed. And it is really only through your feedback that we're able to develop, these meaningful educational programs for you. It takes just a few minutes and we would greatly appreciate it. So there is the link on the screen for you, and it is also in the chat. Well, a big thank you to everyone for joining us today and to the speakers for sharing their knowledge and experience with us on the clinical trial tool. We hope you will get involved with Defeat Duchenne Canada, whether it's helping raise funds through your local community, sharing your story to raise awareness, becoming an advocate, an ambassador, donating, volunteering, or simply joining the conversation on social media. We invite you to do any or all. Again, don't forget to subscribe to our e-news to hear the latest on research, on advocacy efforts, and education at defeatduchenne.ca. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening.